What's up, guys? My name is Zach, and today I am driving a 2016 Hyundai Veloster Turbo. Up front is a 1.6-liter turbocharged inline-4, and down below is a 7-speed automatic dual-clutch transmission. Now, I'm super excited to be driving this Veloster Turbo because I've never driven one before. I've done the base model of this generation, the first generation, as well as I've done the Veloster N from the second generation. But now that the Veloster is no longer being made by Hyundai, it's interesting to look back at this car now knowing its fate. So I'm excited to share that with you today. But before we get on to anything else, I have a website, zackprandtl.com, where you can buy stickers and other merchandise when it becomes available. You can also submit your own vehicle to be reviewed by me through a quick and easy submission form, and you'd get a video of your car just like this one. And you could read my behind-the-scenes blog to see what I'm filming before it comes out on the channel. But let's get back to that 1.6-liter turbo under the hood, making 201 horsepower. Now, according to the owner, he actually bought this car with some modifications done to it, and so it should be making a little bit more than that, but 201 is a really solid and strong number. Now, for this generation, this was the top trim and the best performing Veloster that was offered. They didn't offer the N until the next generation. So this was the king of the hill, and that's thanks to that 1.6-liter Gamma turbo engine. Now, like I said, paired to it is a 7-speed automatic dual clutch transmission, which was offered from 2015 on. So this is only the second year that the dual clutch was offered. Previously, it was just a standard 6-speed. Or you could option this car with a manual 6-speed transmission if that's something that you preferred. Last but not least about the drivetrain, of course, a Veloster is front-wheel drive. So how does it feel to actually drive the Veloster? Well, it's not actually as quick or as potent as I was expecting. Is it a slouch? No, but it also doesn't really have that bite that I was hoping to see. Now, it does make awesome turbo noises, and it does have an aftermarket exhaust system, so it is fun to drive, but it just doesn't have that little extra blip that I was looking for, especially comparing it to the Veloster N of the second generation. That car is far and away way better. But with that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have 2 physical gauges and a screen. Off to the left is my tachometer and coolant temperature, and off to the right is my speedometer and fuel. On the steering wheel on the left, I have my mode, volume, and skip track, as well as my phone options, and off to the right, I have my cruise control settings. The overall look and feel of the steering wheel is very typical Hyundai. I wish I would have gotten some type of turbo badge, but of course not the end of the world. Off to the left, I do have a climate control vent, as well as my gauge dimmer switch and active eco button. Kind of funny that they put that on the turbo model. But moving on to the door, we do have our power mirror adjustments way up high, kind of an interesting placement. And then my dimension speaker for the sound system, along with the lock and unlock, and of course, power windows. Moving into the center, I do have a little infotainment system. This does include a backup camera, which is fine. It's okay. But what's interesting is that this also comes with the Eco Coach and Blue Max, which is sort of Hyundai's efficiency system, which again is kind of interesting to see on the turbo model. Normally, you'd think they'd throw all caution to the wind when it comes to eco settings, but they actually still gave you them here in the Veloster Turbo, and that I wasn't expecting. Down below that, we get a bunch of buttons. So not only do we have like media, tune, volume, things like that, but then we have our climate controls. Climate controls are jumbled. Where to send it off to the left as well as off to the right. You have fan speed and temperature sharing a single knob, which is very peculiar, and again, sticks out in the crowd, and we'll talk a lot about that with my final thoughts segment. In the center is where you'll find the start-stop button. Again, very strange placement. Then I do have an aux, USB, and 12-volt outlet. Very nice to see, with a giant storage cubby. And then we have the shifter itself. Now, the shifter is a jigsaw-style shifter where you have to move it left and right in order to get it into gear. However, it doesn't look that way on the actual shifter bezel, which is kind of nice. It actually looks more expensive than it is. Then we do have cup holders, so we will do a big friggin' bottle test here in the 2016 Hyundai Veloster Turbo. And unfortunately, just like the base model, because I'm 99% sure it's the same cup holders, it in fact does not pass the big friggin' bottle test. Then we do get a little dual opening center console, which is very nice. And then we gotta talk about the seats. The seats are heated, which I am pleasantly enjoying on this cold February morning. And they do say turbo down the side of them. Now, it does look a little boy racer, a little too fast, too furious for me. But I like that at least they gave you something special in terms of the seating when it comes to the turbo. But speaking of seats, we do have back seats. So let's go do a backseat review. So normally, I get in behind the driver, but that is not possible in the Hyundai Veloster. Oh. Because it only has 3 doors. So the door I'm getting in now is my only option for getting in the back, of which is a place I would rather not be, because my head, if I want to sit upright, is touching the rear hatch glass, and one pothole's probably going to KO me. Knees are hitting the seat in front of me. These back seats are not comfortable, they're not spacious, and they're not enjoyable. Can you fit people back here? Yes, but it's not going to be a rather pleasant time. And whoever has to sit behind the driver has no other option besides getting in and scooting over. Like when you're running 15 minutes late to a church service and you gotta sneak into one of the pews, but you're trying not to make noise. They're handing you all the papers and stuff, and you're like, we've all been there. It's that same sort of feeling, trying to scoot over and try to retain some of your dignity. But this is what kind of made the Veloster different and unique. It's a 3-door hatchback. From that side, it has 1 door, but from this side, it has 2. Very, very weird, and I think that helped it stand out from the crowd, which we'll talk about with the final thoughts segment. But speaking of space and doors and hatches and things like that, let's hop out. We'll take a quick look at the trunk and cargo space, and then we'll talk about the looks. All right, so we're on the back of the Veloster Turbo. Little handle in here, you just pull up. And something I've always praised the Veloster for is the cargo space. You can put this second row of seats down, and I love how deep it actually goes. You get plenty of space back here for a weekend trip or even an extended road trip. Moving with these seats down, I think you're going to be very, very happy with the amount of space that you get. This, in one regard, is a lot better than the Civic hatch or Mazda 3 hatch or other vehicles in this segment. That's a really, really big redeeming quality of the Veloster Turbo. Now we gotta talk about the looks, and I've never really been over the moon about the look of the Veloster Turbo, especially the first generation. I think even the second gen is questionable at best, but I also don't think it's the ugliest car ever made. It's just not my particular cup of tea. However, with all of that being said, let's get on to my final thoughts. What do I think finally driving a turbo version of the Veloster, or Veloster? I got yelled at last time I drove one of these for not saying it right. Veloster. Velociter. No, it's Veloster. Who cares? Here's the thing. I'm not really over the moon with this car. I was expecting a little bit more of a punch. And while it is definitely quicker than the standard Veloster, not really knocking my socks off. I think I would still take a Honda Civic Si or Turbo Mazda 3 over this car. Struggling for traction for sure. It's a cold day, but again, it just feels like there's something missing. However, I want to talk about this car as a whole because now that it's out of production and out of Hyundai's lineup, I think this is an interesting vehicle. I think this is one of the most important Hyundais to come out in the last 2 decades because it gave the company brand recognition. Yes, Hyundai has been around since the 1980s, with the Hyundai Excel that I drove last fall, and of course the Hyundai Pony before that. And throughout the 2000s, you know, they had the Hyundai Elantra and a couple of more luxury vehicles that had really weird names. I can't even remember them at the moment. But I feel like the population, at least car enthusiasts, didn't really have a name to latch onto. There wasn't a sort of in with Hyundai. They just kind of did their own thing, and retired accountants mainly bought them, or kids without money bought Hyundai Accents. That was kind of it. Well, I think this car sort of gave them brand recognition. everyone knows, at least in the car community, about the Veloster. It's weird. It grabbed attention. It had 3 doors. What car has 3 doors? You could get it in a turbo. You could get it in a stick shift. Everything about this car is weird and strange and unordinary, which when you're trying to make a name for yourself is good. This car had something that stuck out from the crowd. It wasn't a Honda Civic clone. It wasn't a Mazda 3 clone. It was its own thing. It had personality. And so even though I would probably take its competitors over this one, that's not to say that this was a failed mission or a bad car. It got people's foot in the door. It put them on the map in terms of enthusiasts. Now, some can argue that the Hyundai Tiburon did that in the early 2000s, but I don't know. I'm sure an argument can be made, and I'd love to hear it in the comments, but I feel like the Veloster was a bigger blip on the map than the Tiburon. The Tiburon was still a niche car that people didn't really understand, and more often than not, didn't respect. Well, the Veloster actually had some street cred to it. And I know non-car people that bought these cars, even the turbo models, because they liked how weird and quirky it was. And so that to me is why this car is interesting and probably one of the most important Hyundais in the last 2 decades. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Huge thank you to Paul for letting me take out his Hyundai Veloster Turbo. I'm so glad I was finally able to get this car under my belt and see what it's like as compared to the base model I drove last year. Paul's been absolutely awesome to work with. I'm filming a couple of his vehicles today, and I'm looking forward to working with him more in the future. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.